What's good, y'all? My name is Lucas Lyons, and we got some things to talk about. So, first of all, I am going to address the elephant in the room, or rather the virus in the room, COVID-19. And I want to, for the sake of chronology and normalization, I do want to sort of keep the same structure as my previous video. So I am going to talk about racial puberty and hopefully segue into COVID-19, because there's definitely a racial element here with the virus that I don't want us to miss. So 2 weeks have passed. I really want to do every week. Sorry for not getting to y'all on a consistent basis, but it's been every 2 weeks so far. I want to do weekly, so that's one of the goals that I have. But let's jump into the racial puberty. Here we go, part 3. I'm back. I wanted to take some more time because I watched my previous videos and I noticed, hey, Lucas, you're not really explaining your purpose. Why? You could dive a little bit deeper into that, like give a little bit more context. And so the purpose here is, again, racial puberty, everyone's on their own journey. And I use the analogy of the Republic, Plato's Cave, in which when you see the sun for the first time, and I equate that with race, and now that I've started paying attention to race, it's the most consequential part of my life, and I had a lot of different emotions that came with that, and there are a lot of real life consequences, material, resourceful consequences that have laid in the wake of race. And I just want to I want to communicate and get my message out there so that other people, other young black men, specifically ADOS, can't forget ADOS, that whole movement that's going on right now, specifically the native black people of America, and really understand your place in this country, in the universe, and the time that we're in right now. And just the responsibility, again, as Dr. Bobby E. Wright says, the responsibility is just so awesome. And so I just, again, want to get that out there and let it be known that that's extremely important, because there are spiritual wounds and there are physical wounds that have come from racism, and these are things that we need to address, things that we need to talk about, especially with the talk of actual reparations on the table right now for descendants of slavery. Very important that we're generating this type of discourse. And so I grew up feeling shame, guilt, and I didn't really know why, and there was a lot going on. I remember my mom, and this is the type of thing why I'm talking about racial puberty right now, getting a little bit more into my story. I had a little personal touch on it. And I remember when my mom, she would take me to, I had an interesting childhood. A very interesting childhood in which, I was sort of a problem child. I had a lot of things that I had to take care of. So let me break it down like this. So, grew up in New York City, grew up in the Bronx, grew up in Harlem, 159, Colonial Projects, Rangel Projects. And during that time, during those formative years of my life, I went to KIPP, charter school, major charter school throughout the entire country, actually. I was going to KIPP during its sort of nascent years. And this was a time where, I was getting a great education. Most of my teachers were white, didn't really pay attention to it, even though that did definitely play a role in my upbringing, and acknowledging that. And one of the things that they really encourage at KIPP in the South Bronx, KIPP Academy, shout out to KIPP Academy. And one of the things that they really encouraged was for you to, go away to school, do different things in high school, go to private schools, go to parochial schools and whatnot. And I ended up going to Church Farm School. Shout out to Church Farm School in Exton, Pennsylvania. And even there, even throughout KIPP, and even there, I was just getting, the osmosis was taking effect. Kenneth Clark talks about this in his book, Prejudice and the Child. And he did the doll experiment with black dolls, black children, white children, and how blacks sort of want to dive into whiteness and have the benefits and the privileges that come with whiteness. And so one of the things Kenneth Clark talks about is this osmosis, and this is how I was getting my racist ideas. And I was subscribing to these white supremacist ideas about how whiteness is sort of the ideal. And again, the benefits, the privileges. Now, I'm not just talking about emotionally, because there is sort of this, even though it is psychotic, studies have talked about this. Again, I highly recommend Kenneth Clark's book, Prejudice and Your Child. I believe that's the title. And, you know, there are some really psychotic things about believing that you are superior, just like there are about believing that you're inferior for people of color of this world, non-white people. And so yeah, through osmosis, I was like accumulating all these ideas about what it meant to be black in this country, what it meant to be black in the world, because you know America is the hub of racism and white supremacy. And Noam Chomsky, to sort of tie those two things together, Noam Chomsky talks about the two major opinions in this world. There's the world opinion, and then there's the United States of America's opinion. And you know, I can't emphasize how grand America's influence is on the world. And because this is the hub of white supremacy, you know, it is a global phenomenon. And so, again, going to church farm school, a good mix of different ethnicities, different cultures, different races. Again, shout out to church farm school. It was an all-boys school as well. Love all the dudes that I met there. Some of the best friends that I've ever I have to this day. I've known them for what? Oh, it's more than a decade now. And yeah, so that was going on at church farm school. You know, it was, again, the osmosis, it was there. I didn't really think about it, didn't really consider it, but I knew it was floating around in my head, and I knew that I didn't want to peek into it too much, because again, that sun, thinking about the analogy of the allegory of the cave, that sun, I felt the heat. I knew something else was going on, but I didn't want to pay attention to it, because one of two things was the case. One, either black people really truly were inferior, and this is something that it was just something too awesome to overcome, and I didn't want to deal with that. Or two, black people are not naturally inferior for whatever reason, and there's some type of game being played, and that would even involve work as well. And this is why I didn't really want to even look into it. And then I got to Hobart and William Smith colleges. And talk about one of the most wild times of my life. It was predominantly white. I would say 95% white. Could count the black people on your hands. And, you know, this was, I would say, one of the most tragic and trashy times of my life, because, you know, with those many white people, I saw wealth like I've never seen it before. You know, going from Geneva, New York, shout out to Geneva, going to Geneva, New York, back and forth, and coming back to the projects in Harlem, there was this, and I wasn't prepared for this. You know, I didn't have the racial stamina. Again, we're talking about racial puberty here. We're talking about racial puberty here. I didn't have the racial stamina to really digest what was happening. I really wasn't built for really acknowledging the difference in wealth status, the difference in ideology, the difference in priorities, the difference in just perspective. And working across lines of difference with white people, it was just something that I knew that I should sort of be close to, have proximity to, because of the, again, osmosis of just absorbing these things about our society. And even throughout, I would even say up to junior year, again, talking about the tragic and trashiness that was going on, it was something I didn't really want to analyze or be critical of, which led to some serious psychological problems that I was going through towards the end of my college career that I don't really talk about too much. And so, yeah, so that was going on, that was happening. And like I said, I believe in my previous videos, I barely read, but when race started to really become a factor in my life, that's when I started to, you know, get into reading, thank God. I don't want to talk about racial puberty. It's already been about 10 minutes. I don't want to talk about racial puberty the whole time, but I just wanted to give some background. And now I'm a teacher. I actually teach for KIP, the middle school that I went to. Not that specific school, even though I did teach there for 2 years. I teach at KIP in Broadway in Harlem. I'm currently a teacher right now, special education teacher, 7th and 8th grade math, and I love it. I love my children. I'll talk about how I got into teaching a different time, but I'm very blessed because I really enjoy it. You know how people talk about if you enjoy your job so much, when you go to work, you don't feel like it's work. It's not really a job. I mean, there are really great days. There's not so great days. But I would say overall, I'm definitely blessed to have be able to teach. I love my kids. I love doing what I do, and I do want to, use my platform as a teacher, as someone who touches the lives of families and kids, and other adults and whatnot, as a platform to really, do some good in this world and create the necessary dialogue and discourse to help Black people in this country, ADOS, specifically Native Black people in this country. I having to always qualify that, but that's very specific. That's something that I have to do because, there again, Road to Zero Wealth. I haven't been saying it, but the links are going to be in the description below. Because we are in dire straits right now. We are in a dire situation, and this is why you created this YouTube channel as well. And I'll get into teaching and all that later. But that's sort of my story. Now, that's about 10 minutes. Now we're at 11 minutes. I do want to talk about, I'm going to have to get to COVID-19. I don't want my videos to be over 20 minutes. But because of this virus going around, I can't talk about other things. So I'll just very quickly just mention a couple quick things I was going to talk about. Eric Dyson endorsing Joe Biden. In the video that I saw, and I mean, I would love for people to leave comments, the video that I saw, there's nothing specific, nothing tangible that he named for a reason that any Black person should endorse Joe Biden, especially someone of the caliber that Michael Eric Dyson has. And it's actually quite shameful to see Michael Eric Dyson saying what? Extraordinary history, a standard bearer for what? American normalcy, which is white supremacy. I mean, how is Joe Biden the standard for normalcy? I guess normalcy is not repenting for the federal and state violence that happened on Black bodies, that occurred against Black bodies. I mean, Michael Eric Dyson, what are you talking about? Endorsing Joe Biden. Lord have mercy. Give a specific reason why Joe Biden, a strident warrior for the war on drugs. What are you talking about, Eric Dyson? But that's something I wanted to talk about. Can't, because I got to talk about the virus in a second. Four Tops, legendary Black quartet group ensemble, also endorsing Joe Biden. We're gonna have to talk about, people don't want to use the meme about boomers, but the older Black generation. Come on now, we're getting taken advantage of. I mean, Black people have been getting taken advantage of for a while. I'm not saying it's the older Black generation. We'll talk about it. Four Tops. Why are people endorsing Joe Biden? Now there's a law banning, a federal law banning lynching. Is it federal law now? A little too late. That's showcasing at its finest. And I think that's also, talk about lynching very quickly. I think it's showcasing. I think it's just something to throw at Black people, say, look what the federal government has done. But Thomas Sowell, huge body of work. So grateful for what he's done for the Black community, even though, people, because he's conservative, Republican, whatever, people don't really appreciate what he's done. But, you can argue the man got some work. You can agree, disagree. I disagree with some of the stuff. I really appreciate the fact that he has laid information out there. But Thomas Sowell, I hate the argument that he brings up when it comes to sort of how around the world and other places during genocides, I think he talks about the Armenian genocide or the Ottoman Empire. I forget specifically. I should have the data. I do have my notes here, but I should have more data. Thomas Sowell talks about during genocides how the number of lynchings pale in comparison around the world. There wasn't a genocide going on here. It was the use of Black bodies to accrue wealth for this country, and they needed Black bodies. It wasn't like they were just trying to get rid of Black bodies, like what's happening now. Bobby E. Wright, God bless his soul, talks about menticide now. There's really no need for the Black body anymore, and you really can't compare those two things when there's genocide compared to ADOS in this country. And so when you talk about lynching, it's the fact that Black people were being lynched when they would would spill blood for this country. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, talking about Thomas Sowell's argument about lynching. But yeah, now there's something about there's a law against lynching, please, showcasing again in its finest. Tonight there's supposed to be the Democratic debate, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. I mean, recently articles have been coming out saying Bernie Sanders is losing the African American vote because a lot of them are falling for the entrapment of Joe Biden. And also, why should black people be voting for Bernie Sanders? There's a Vice documentary about how black people in the South some people are still canvassing for Bernie Sanders. And I'm just like, why should people vote for Bernie Sanders? Again, my message to Eric Dyson, you see movements going on for black people. Demand more. Let's demand more. It didn't happen with Obama. Let's demand more of our representatives. Michael Eric Dyson, someone like you especially, speak up, speak out, let them know what we want. And I mean, there's a very good layout about what the new Black agenda should be at the ADOS website. Again, shout outs to Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore. Say what you want about them. Say what you want about their message, their credibility, blah, blah. Look at the research, and then the numbers don't lie. And that's one of the things that I greatly appreciate about the movement. So those are a couple quick things that I wanted to touch on. Now, with about 4 minutes left, let's talk about the coronavirus. COVID-19. I was in California for one of the best professional developments of my life. I was in California for a teacher professional development session, and this was about 3 weeks ago, and this is when some of the coronavirus stuff started to first touch the United States. And the cruise ship, I think the Princess something, that situation was going on, and people were starting to get nervous because it was coming to the States. And I was planning on staying. I was supposed to come back the 27th of February. I planned on staying until March 1st, that Sunday. I changed my flight that Tuesday night when I landed. I changed my flight to come back Thursday. Thursday evening, I got back Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning to New York City. I also didn't mention, I guess in the beginning, I should have mentioned, I guess it's not that important. I live in the Bronx currently, BX. I live in the Bronx currently. So I was in California, now I'm back. And the CDC said weeks ago, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the virus is going to come into the United States. Now, I forget the woman's name, Dr. Nancy Monsieur, I think is her name, the director of the CDC, is saying most people are going to get ill. Many people are going to contract the virus. Some might show some mild symptoms, but that's not always the case. There's like flu-like symptoms usually. The CDC said this. There's going to be severe, I believe was the word used, disruption in American daily lives. This was said weeks ago. Weeks ago. And being a resident of New York City, I'm very disappointed in Mayor Bill de Blasio. And people say, yeah, he's the mayor, he has a lot to balance. I understand. And, I mean, I listen to a lot of NPR too. Shout out to NPR. I listen to a lot of NPR. And I just feel like, and don't get me started on Trump and his handling of the situation and his lies. But I feel like there's been so much research talking about how this is dangerous. This is what's going to, X is going to happen, Y is going to happen, Z is going to happen. The CDC has been saying this for such a long time. The WHO recently declared it a pandemic, and what am I to say? That I know more than some people. I know how to run a city. I know how to run a country. I mean, this thing is spreading like crazy. I'm a teacher. I'm not going in until April 20th, apparently at the earliest. And de Blasio saying that's overly optimistic, saying that we'll be in by April 20th. I mean, the world is about to change in a very interesting way, I believe. Talk about racial puberty, and there has to be a racial element to this. I don't know where this idea, this information is coming from that black people can't contract COVID-19 or come down with the virus. I don't know where that's coming from, but I mean, thinking about, as an educator, this is why I want to give more context. As an educator, thinking about, we want to move to remote learning. What about the families that don't have access to Wi-Fi, that don't have access to computers? Where is the technology going to come from? Where are those resources going to come from? Why is it on our children who don't have this? Why is that on them to sort of find a way to, get through this sort of natural disaster. What happens when black people get fired from their jobs or they work in the service industry? Because these are the black people who are working in service industries, and jobs that are falling to the wayside or that are stagnant because of this virus. What happens when black people, if God forbid black people are contracting this disease and they don't have the resources, the monetary needs to get the medicines and the testing that they need? It's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out with this virus. And I was telling people, and people were calling me an alarm and asking them not to worry. And I was telling people something's going on here. The CDC was saying this about a month ago, that these things, get ready for this. And shout out to DEMCAD. I've been following DEMCAD's channel for quite some time now. He's a black prepper. You don't have too many black preppers out there. And he talks a lot about when shit hits the fan and what to do in times like this. He's also very political, and he gives very interesting ideas from a black perspective, like a prepping, even from a black perspective. This is, again, racial puberty. Race is so consequential, even behind prepping. Race plays a huge role because he comes at the world at a very interesting perspective, and I really support a lot of what DEMCAD does, a lot of what he says. Very practical, and he's talking about COVID-19, and I would really recommend that you go check his channel out and see what he's saying, see what he's talking about, have some things prepared, and I have to do some more shopping myself to make sure that I am absolutely ready for April 20th. What is it today? March 13th? A month. We're going to be out of school for a month. And again, overly optimistic, de Blasio says, the school year might just be over. So this is a very interesting, dare I say, perilous times that we live in. And we just have to just give each other mercy during this time, give each other grace, and just understand that we're going to have to make it through this. This virus is no joke. Social isolation is going to be the name of the game. And, just count your blessings and be safe and stay healthy out there. I will make an effort to get out another video within the next week, and that's going to be the time limit I'm trying to set for myself. Check the links down below. I hope to leave some citations, some receipts, as always. Love giving you guys that information. The Spook Who Speaks. I'll get into where that title, the name of the YouTube channel, comes from, and the Racial Puberty Part 4, the next installment. But I appreciate y'all, and please like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, do all those things. And until next time, y'all, be safe out here. Until next time.